It started with a letter. Not an email, not a knock on the door, not even a friendly warning. Just a plain, white envelope taped to my mailbox like some kind of legal threat. I remember it clearly because it was a calm Tuesday morning, and I had just stepped outside with my coffee, expecting nothing more dramatic than watering my lawn. But the moment I peeled that envelope off and saw the bold red text that read, HOA violation notice, I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Now, living in an HOA community, you kind of get used to small nitpicks, trash cans being out too long, grass half an inch too tall. But this one was different. This notice claimed that the two oak trees in my front yard were posing a structural risk to neighborhood property values and were visually inconsistent with the aesthetic standards of the community. In simple terms, they wanted me to remove my trees or face a fine of $250 per day until compliance was met. $250 per day. For trees that had been standing there longer than most of the houses in this neighborhood had even existed. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they meant someone else's property, maybe the address got mixed up. But no, my name was printed clearly at the top, along with a deadline that gave me exactly 10 days to cut them down. And here's the part that really got me. Those trees weren't just decoration. They provided shade that reduced my summer energy bill, they were perfectly healthy, and they were inspected just a year ago when I refinanced my home. There was absolutely no reason for them to suddenly become a risk. So I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I called the HOA office. The woman on the phone spoke in that overly polite tone that somehow makes everything sound even more threatening, explaining that the board had conducted a visual assessment during their monthly drive-through inspection and determined that the root systems could eventually damage sidewalks or underground utilities. Eventually. Not now, not proven, just eventually. And when I asked if they had any certified arborist report to back that claim, there was a pause long enough for me to realize the answer before she even said it. They didn't. They just assumed. They assumed they could intimidate me into paying thousands of dollars to remove two mature, healthy oak trees because they didn't match the neighborhood vibe. But what they didn't know was that I had already scheduled a professional inspection months earlier after a storm passed through the area. A certified arborist had come out, examined both trees thoroughly, checked for disease, root instability, structural weaknesses, everything, and gave me a full written report stating that the trees were in excellent health and posed zero risk to nearby structures for decades to come. So instead of panicking, I waited. I showed up to the next HOA board meeting with copies of that report in hand, ready to defend what was rightfully mine. The room was packed, probably because word had already spread that someone was challenging the board. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly laid out the facts, explained the inspection process, the arborist's credentials, and the conclusions that directly contradicted the HOA's claims. I even read the part that stated removing the trees unnecessarily could destabilize soil conditions and negatively impact drainage in surrounding properties, which ironically meant their demand could create the very damage they were pretending to prevent. The look on the board members' faces shifted from confidence to discomfort faster than I expected. One of them tried to argue that aesthetics were still a concern, but that's when I pointed out that our community guidelines specifically protected mature native trees unless they posed a documented safety hazard. Documented. Not imagined. Not speculated. Documented. And I had the documentation, they didn't. By the end of that meeting, the violation notice was officially withdrawn, the fines were canceled, and the board announced they would be reviewing their inspection procedures moving forward. But the best part came afterward when several neighbors approached me outside, quietly admitting they'd received similar notices about landscaping issues and never thought to question them. Turns out, sometimes all it takes is one person pushing back with actual evidence to remind everyone that rules aren't supposed to be enforced based on guesswork. And now, every time I sit in my living room and look out at those two oak trees swaying peacefully in the breeze, I'm reminded that standing your ground, especially when you've got the facts on your side, can make all the difference.